Welcome to The In Between. This is part of the Enduring Minds podcast on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. Why The In Between? Because these episodes will come in between our guest episodes, as well as the conversation being focused on the muscle that lies 6 inches between your ears. Today, Evan and I are going to be talking about episode 4 of The Clubhouse. This is a behind the scenes documentary of the Boston Red Sox, and episode 4 is focused on Jarren Duran. I want to warn you now that the conversation of suicide is the topic in episode 4 that you can watch on Netflix, and is going to be something that we discuss on this episode. If you or somebody you know is in need of help, please dial 988 and get the help that you need. You are not alone in this world. So we're going to get started, and I'm going to turn this question over to Evan, because I saw the article on ESPN that mentioned Jarren Duran and coming out about potentially committing suicide. And he tells the story in this article, but then I watched episode 4 of The Clubhouse, and I know, Evan, you did too. So I'm going to turn it over to you. What was your first reaction when I sent you the link to the article on ESPN, knowing that you're not a baseball guy?
Yeah, I've never played an inning of baseball in my life. I've never played it as a sport. I've maybe swung a bat a few times at batting cage, but I've been to one major league game. So yeah, baseball wasn't my thing, but I think this really speaks to how universal that mental health conversation is. It's not just isolated to a certain sport or a certain person. It's out there for everybody.
Yeah, I think the other piece too, right, is he's a professional baseball player, which means he makes a lot of money. And the idea that mental health struggles are relegated to a particular set of people is obviously untrue. And we can even throw the financial aspect in there too, because I know oftentimes, I'm a huge baseball fan and I'm a huge sports fan. Oftentimes fans will say they've got enough money. They've got so much money. They don't need to worry about anything. And the reality is they're human beings, right? They're not robots out on the field performing these sports. And I think there's a disconnect between the fan and the fact that a player is a human being.
Yeah, I think the unique part about being in the spotlight like that is you are subject to everybody else's opinions of you, whether you're doing well or you're doing poor. You're going to hear about it either way. And I think that's the unique thing. Like mental health and mental illness, it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care what job you do, how much you make, or any of those aspects. It doesn't care. It's going to take you the exact same way as everybody else. And I think watching that documentary, the series on episode 4, where he speaks about his story and how it relates to how he was brought up and his childhood and the expectations and the push and the drive from his father, particularly, it kind of spoke a lot to me, obviously being a father myself of 2 kids, and how I'm trying to raise my daughters to not be like, love is unconditional. It doesn't matter how good you do or how bad you do. Like, it's like, I love you no matter what. So yeah, it was a very unique, I know you kind of connected on the fact that he's Puerto Rican as well. And you had the same feelings as like what you were brought up with your father. So I'd love to hear about kind of your perspective from that side, knowing the cultural aspect as well too.
Yeah, so I had no idea that Jarren Duran was Puerto Rican. I presumed he was Hispanic of some sort based on his father's name being Octavio. And in the middle of this episode, he's wearing a hat, and upside down it says Caguas on it, which is a town in Puerto Rico, and it has the Puerto Rican flag on it and the Roberto Clemente number 21. And I sat up. I was like, oh, okay. A lot of this conversation that has been taking place prior to this reveal has felt like the machismo Hispanic male, which is a lot of the stuff that I saw growing up in my household, and the pressure to perform and the pressure to get better. And I clearly didn't have Major League Baseball talent. Otherwise I'd be there today. But the pressure to always do better and to stand out and to get better grades and go to college. And that pressure was always there because neither of my parents went to college. My dad had a 3rd grade education. He came to the United States from Puerto Rico and made a life for himself and our family. but I absolutely resonated with it. And the thing that caught me the most, Evan, was at the very end when his father apologizes. Like, that is very uncommon in Hispanic households. At least it was when I was growing up. And maybe today we've matured a little bit more because we talk about this stuff a little bit more. But hearing that apology almost brought me to tears, because that's not something I would have expected from a Hispanic dad. I would have expected that's what you're supposed to do, and that's how I raised you, and you're supposed to be tough. And but maybe the idea of his son taking his life was the thing that made him rethink about his relationship with his son when his son was much younger.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Funny enough, I fact checked myself because I remember watching the episode 4 that he played for the Mexican team during the World Championships, and his father was actually Mexican descent, not Puerto Rican. I think the Puerto Rican flag is on his hat because of the baseball player that he loved growing up.
No, his mother is Puerto Rican, because I fact checked it last night myself.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I saw it when I saw he was playing for Mexico. It's like, I guess, again, having that descent, you can actually do both, which is crazy. I guess I'll unfact my check myself then. That's why I love the in between, because we're just rolling with it, so it's great.
Yeah, and the thing about, I don't mean to interrupt you, but the thing about his mother being Puerto Rican is I saw my mother in his mother, right? Like, I could literally see and hear my mother saying the things that she was saying in episode 4. And I looked at Lori last night and I was like, I now have a second favorite baseball player, Jarren Duran, mostly because he's Puerto Rican, but because he's also come out to talk about this important topic in a space. Again, it's Major League Baseball, right? Like, it's one thing for Evan, Birch, and myself to talk about our mental health struggles and how many ever followers we have and people that pay attention to us. But here's a guy that now is going to travel from city to city on a big stage. And again, fans are not always, nice, shall we say. And so when he goes up to the plate, who the hell knows what some of these fans are going to be yelling at him. And to be able to still come out and do that says a lot about him.
Yeah, I think the piece that I, obviously not being in baseball and understanding the pressures of that sport itself, I know, obviously, understand there's only so many at bats you get, and there's only so many chances you get to hit the ball in a game. So you either do it or you don't, and you're dependent on that, right? But I think the piece that I gravitated towards from that episode and reading the article was the fact that he himself wouldn't allow himself to be proud of what he did or experienced. And it just, I keep going back to that childhood piece because I see my girls growing up, and you see parents that are pushing their kids into like competitive level sports and other things at a very young age, and demanding perfection from them, and travel teams and all of this stuff. And the kids are like, not even, like, my girls are 7 and 10, and I see what some of the kids are doing, like even 12 years old. And I can't help but think that, like, the parents are vicariously living through their kids and like pushing them because of what maybe they didn't have or what they weren't able to do. And it just is like this unneeded pressure. And like, when I talk about that, like, unconditional love piece, it has nothing to do with like what they're capable of. Like, I don't ever want to ask my kids, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because then I'm defining them by like the work that they do or what they like, who they're going to become, versus like, what are their values? Are they good people? Are they generous? Are they kind? That matters to me so much more than the performance aspect of it, and having it, the love based on, oh, if I don't do good, my dad's not going to love me. Like, that's a really hard place to grow up in. And I can only imagine that gets carried through as you get older. And now, like you were talking about, you have these fans that are booing him and like telling him to get off the field because he's having a rough year. Well, what do you think that's going to do to somebody that, like, if the fans don't love him, then how can he love himself? And I think that's the part that I'm pulling from it.
Yeah, right. Like, the idea of being able to separate somebody constantly telling you how bad you are to be like, yeah, I can deal with that because I know I'm not bad. Like, it doesn't work that way, right? You keep getting told how bad you are, you're going to believe that you're bad. And then it gets, it's a ball that rolls downhill. One of the things you said was, you mentioned your kids were 7 and 10. Jarren Duran is 24 years old, right? I'm 51. And there's a large part of me that thinks about access to people these days via social media. When I was 7, 10, and 24 years old, that stuff didn't exist. And so nobody had access to me. I didn't have access to anybody at that level. And it makes me wonder if the parents, as you said, living vicariously through their kids these days, because I could be his father's age and he could be my son. I could have been 27 and had a child, right? And because I didn't have that, are parents seeing not just the success of their children and wishing that they had it, but now seeing the fame that comes in through likes and comments on social media? And that adds another layer to the parents living vicariously. Like, why didn't I get that? How come I couldn't have had that? And now I'm going to push my kids to do that. I want, like, what do you think of that? And I wonder if there's a study out there that looks at this.
Yeah, it's, you can only, I mean, even in the interviews watching that episode, and they asked his dad, has your son come and talked to you about his mental health? And he's like, no, he's never talked to me about it. And they said, would you want him to? And he said, yes. So I think there's this, like, there's definitely that little bit of, I think, guilt attached to what he probably put his son through. And yes, he's performing, and yes, he's doing well now, and he's having, this, top 20 baseball player. But I can't help but think of, when you make something your entire identity, which I'm assuming when you're in major league sports like that, that becomes like who you are as a person. You can't separate yourself at that point. So I just keep asking myself, like, what happens if he gets injured? What happens if the team starts to tank or he starts having a bad period? Like, there's multi-layered trauma that comes with these types of situations. And I can't help but think that it's just still sitting there dormant, waiting to show up again. I mean, he talks about, like, him journaling and doing a bunch of other things, which is amazing. And the fact that he even talked about that aspect of it was pretty amazing. Again, like you said, a high profile player coming out and being able to speak about these things is pretty, like, that's huge. It's just showing you how prevalent it is, and the voices that are speaking up about it.
Yeah, I was also impressed with him journaling, and one thing that it made me chuckle, but I understood where he was coming from, was when they show him writing on his wrists, the tape on his wrists, and he writes "fuck him," and he's like, "This is the mentality I have to have." And I have to believe that, if he's in the outfield and he makes a bad play, there's fans going to be yelling at him and carrying on. That's an opportunity for him to just look at his wrist and think and sort of reset. Instead of getting caught up in what they're yelling at him, he looks at his wrist and it helps him reset. The thing that I wonder about, because I'm picturing this happening in Fenway Park in Boston, and I can picture it happening at Citi Field in New York or Wrigley Field in Chicago, where you have these big markets. If he was playing in Kansas City, where there's less media coverage and not less pressure to perform, but less media coverage, would this be a conversation still, or is it because he's in this city that is uber competitive, that wins championships, and they highlight it in the episode as well? Does that heighten the scenario in which he finds himself in?
I think absolutely. It comes down to, as well, the fans, because, like, the way I compare, I'll say, like, trying to make your dad proud, like, he's trying to make the fans proud. Like, that, it's just, you're just trading one for the other in this case. Like, it's not your dad anymore. It's like the fans, your coach, your, owner of the team, all of these other pieces. And I think that's where, I will say, as, a fan of other sports, like, you can become almost too much as a fan. Like, you start to believe that these people are, like, that you, like, own these players because you pay for the tickets to go to the games and do all these things, that you feel like you have the right to say these things or speak these words to, like, a human. Like, at the end of the day, he's a human. And I can't And I think society has just like gone way too far the other side of thinking that they can just say these things with no repercussions whatsoever. Like where did kindness go? Like I just can't even think to myself, like, even in running for me, if somebody was heckling me that, get up the hill faster, like, what are you doing? Like, I can only imagine like hecklers and ultra running. I can't imagine it, but I can like picture it. Like, what would that look like?
Mm-hmm.
And it just, to me, like, there's all these expectations. And again, with everything he went through with his childhood and how he was raised, his dad coaching him, and all of these other aspects of it, I can't help but think that he's trying to like challenge going against like, oh, I don't want to go through it the way that I went through it when I was younger, so I'm going to just keep pushing through no matter how painful it is, no matter how people speak to me. And I just don't think it's sustainable. And I think that's the part that I really see in it, is the sustainability aspect. Like, how far can you go if all you're doing is fighting against your past?
I don't have an answer, obviously, to that question, but I agree with you, right? If everything you do is fighting against your past and there's negativity there, that's what you're going to see. And that's what's going to end up rattling around in your mind is the negativity part. So, how do you break free of it? And this is a great segue because I will tell you this I love baseball. I participate in a fantasy baseball league, and Jarren Duran's name was on the list. And I was like, who is this guy? I know he had a good season last year, but who is this guy? And when that article came out, is when I first kind of knew who Jarren Duran was, right? Like all of a sudden, here's a name that I can read about and then watch the episode, and all of a sudden, here's a person that I'm going to follow. And I think that is something that he probably has to lean on because he's come out and talked about this, right? The communication aspect of bringing that about. So he's no longer carrying the weight of this on his shoulders. He's let it go. And I'm sure for the number of days leading up to when they told him, by the way, the entire docuseries is going to drop on this date and there's stress and pressure and all of that stuff. But now it's out there.
Mhm.
And now he can move forward. At least I hope he can move forward, because I know when I wrote about my disordered eating for our website at runtrimag.com, I hit public or schedule, excuse me, closed my laptop, walked away, and I was like, whenever it goes out is when it goes out. I don't want to know anything about it. And then so there was anxiety leading up to publish day. And then once it went out and what came back was way more positive than I expected.
Mhm.
So I hope that what's coming back to him today is way more positive than expected. And that will allow him to start to move forward at a way that he can talk about this without feeling stress and anxiety and just constantly reflecting negative on negative.
Yeah, I think, especially I can mirror that feeling as well too. When I first started talking about my story and had a couple of people just similar to, the way that you said that, myself and Om speaking about our situations allowed you to feel that support, that you could speak about your situation as well too. And I think that's that connection and community aspect. And like you say, I hope that other players and other sports and other areas, or even fans, check themselves as well too in those moments. And I think, and that's when I talk about the, always fighting against your past. If the only thing you're constantly doing is challenging, like, oh, I was, I didn't have this when I was younger, so I want to give my kids everything I didn't have. Well, now all you're doing is coming from this negative sentiment the entire time of like, I'm going to give them everything I didn't have. Well, that you're just perpetuating the negative now. Why can't you just like stop for a moment and think to yourself, like, what do I want to give them? It doesn't have to be everything you didn't have. You have to do it based on like your values, your beliefs, and your ideals, and what you want to teach them. And that's coming from a genuine place, as opposed to, again, fighting from the past piece. So that's my belief of it, is just understanding that you don't have to be running off of the negative, because that's not going to fuel you. It's that positive, it's that joy when you're doing well, you're doing well. But understanding that if you can develop the tools to handle either outcome, on each side. I think that's the sweet spot, when you know that if I have a bad game or a good game, that doesn't define me, because I don't define myself by what I do. I define myself by who I am. And I think that's what I saw as he was kind of coming out of it, that, poor season 2023, coming out in 2024 and having just like a breakout year. And all the players and all of his teammates are just saying like he's a different person. And that's that like post-traumatic growth side of things. When you come out of the depression, you come out of those things, that I think is pretty amazing.
So one of the things that caught my attention in that episode was Justin Turner and Jarren Duran, the conversation they showed of them in a dugout. And Justin Turner is a veteran, and he seemed to really care for, I'll call him the kid. When you started sharing your story, were there people that came out to you and said, thank you for sharing, or, I really appreciate what you did, or something to that effect that made you, I don't know if feel better is the right word, but gave you more confidence that, okay, it was hard this time to talk about it, I can talk about it again? And the second part to that is, now there are other rookies who are coming up, and this might be the first time that they hear about Jarren Duran and his mental health struggles. Do you think that they would approach him the same way people will have approached you after you told your story?
Yeah, I had somebody come up to me during my release of my documentary film that followed my kind of 2023 race season, and through my mental health journey of running away from things to now running forward towards things. And I had somebody come up to me after the film, and the only thing that she said to me was "me too," and gave me the absolute biggest hug I have ever received from a stranger in my entire life. And that moment is ingrained in my head. And I've had multiple people come up to me, but that single moment, and then I later found out that she was a 20-year police dispatcher. So that was her, like, she got it. And I think that's the unique thing. Like, all of our stories are wildly different, but there's this like mutual connection and community that comes together when we do talk about these things, and everybody just feels a little bit lighter every single time. So I think having that out there is going to allow him to, again, like you said, let go of maybe what was not serving him, and be able to mentor and help these younger athletes come up. And I think the organization itself is probably looking at it twice as well too, and going like, well, if one of our star players is feeling this way, like what do we as an organization? And when I talk about organization, we can be talking about, yes, the Boston Red Sox, but any organization. It doesn't have to be Major League Sports or anything. What more can we be doing to be supporting our people? If this is, if they were at the point of having a rifle in their mouth, like that's like, that should be the red light right there.
Yeah, that concept I hadn't even thought about is the organization and their approach to their players these days. And baseball is filled with analytics and filled with mathematicians and statisticians, and they're calculating all of these things. But what you're not capable of calculating is somebody's mental health. There's no spreadsheet for it, right? And so they probably do have people on staff, and I would not be surprised if other organizations, after seeing this, are like, we should get in touch with the Red Sox and figure out what they're doing and implement that in our clubhouse as well. Because when it's all said and done, baseball is a business. These owners are multi-millionaires and billionaires, and their investment is in the players. And in order for them to recoup their money, right, they have to have those players performing. And what's a better way to, one, impart empathy, and two, help these athletes play at the top level that they're playing at on a consistent basis, than to have somebody to talk to them and communicate, right? The ability to just even get things off your chest, for that matter, might help a player turn it around, because maybe they're struggling because they're not seeing the ball well, or didn't catch it well, or whatever it might be. But being able to just talk about it instead of swallowing it and saying, and I wrote this down, pressure to perform, right? Because that's what Jarren kept talking about in this episode. And so now if you have a couple of bad days in a row, that pressure mounts. And how do you get out from under that pressure? And I think your point is accurate in that the organization is probably helping Jarren, and I would not be surprised if the other Major League Baseball teams called the Red Sox to figure out what they're doing. With your past profession, there wasn't a scenario for you to go to somebody. Would that have been something that you had taken advantage of had there been somebody there? Would you have been mature enough to say, I need to go talk to somebody about this?
I mean, when I first came into the industry, 20 years ago, it didn't exist. There was very loose conversations about it, but there was never a plan or tools or anything in place. And I think that's where it lies for me, is having a plan in place and being proactive instead of reactive. And why not have, when athletes come in, mandatory, you have to go see a psychologist, you have to go do this, like, have a plan in place, have the support and this culture of support right from the beginning. Even if the person is not displaying any sort of need for it, creating those tools and that kind of foundation right off the bat is, in my opinion, it's definitely something I would have taken advantage of. Because, well, I don't even say take advantage of, I think it should be mandatory. It shouldn't even be a question, especially if they're investing in these players the way that they do. Why wouldn't you throw some money at this and say, you know what, guys, like, we appreciate that you don't want to talk to somebody, but if you don't talk to somebody, like, you're going to be benched. You don't have to tell us what you talk about, but you need to go and do this. And I think that's the part for me, is the proactive versus the reactive side of things. And that's just been something I've seen from my profession and my time, and I think would be beneficial across, again, any organization. It doesn't have to be just professional sports.
Do you ever watch the show Billions?
I'm trying to remember no, I haven't.
So on the show Billions, Wendy Rhodes is a psychologist for Bobby Axelrod and their financial company. And all the traders, essentially, to your point, have to go talk to her, right? And because they're under pressure to perform and they're trading in the billions of dollars, right? Where a single mistake can cost you billions of dollars. And so they wove her into that storyline like impeccably well for the show. But if we remove the show from it and the idea that these high performers who have a lot of pressure on them are going to seek help from a therapist in that environment, in that business, in the financial world, why wouldn't we all do that, right? Like, I got it, they're trading billions, but to me, $100 is $1 billion, right? Like, it's important to my bank account too. And so being able to have the opportunity to communicate with somebody and talk to somebody should be there for everybody. And we should make it simple for people to have these conversations. I mean, you and I talk about it, and we talked about it earlier today, is breaking the silence, right? We should allow people to break the silence in the way that they need to, so that they can move forward with their life and with whatever they're doing, so they can be better people for everybody around them.
Yeah. And breaking that silence, we talked about this word stigma, and I feel like it's this overused phrase that really doesn't solve the problem. Like, people talk about, and we've even said it, and I've thought a lot about it, and like, breaking the stigma is great, but it's not the root cause of the problems that everybody are going through. It's those societal expectations and the norms of men need to be strong. We need to push through everything, and we shouldn't have to ask for help. We should be the providers. We should be this, we should be that. And again, where is that voice coming from? The cultural aspects, the society aspects. But I think, like, it's so much more than just the stigma now, and really having these, like, down and dirty conversations about the stuff that, like, we're literally digging out of the ground that people don't want to talk about. And that to me is where the solutions are going to come from, and the problem solving and the things that are going to bring people forward. It's not just breaking the stigma. Anybody can talk about breaking the stigma and doing a dance on a reel next to some music about anxiety. Like, I get it, and I can appreciate that people are having fun with it, but I think the word stigma to me has met its day.
The other one that we talked about was the word safe space. And for me, that has met its day, and it should be wiped out too, because it has been hijacked in a way where people don't feel safe in a safe space because the concept is somebody's already attacking me in that area. And I don't remember the name that you brought up in the conversation, but I thought to myself, that feels more comfortable. That feels like a place where I can go and hang out, share my story, and not feel like somebody's going to come from the outside and attack me for my thinking and for my thoughts. And look, we're putting ourselves out in the public. Today, we're recording this episode. We'll publish it, excuse me. And we've done it already with our own episodes on the Enduring Minds podcast. And so we've already put ourselves out there. And what we have done is created a space for ourselves to have those conversations. And every time we bring a guest on, somebody else is getting into that space. And then when this episode airs, there's going to be people who listen to it and they're going to join our space. And then before you know it, that concentric circle is going to expand to the point where anybody who's on the outside looking in, what they say won't have as big of an impact as if I was standing on, in the town square by myself yelling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the phrase is supportive space.
Yeah.
And that feels so much more inviting to me, to be able to create that supportive space, to understand that it's like there's risk everywhere, and safe spaces aren't, like you said, safe spaces anymore. There's risk everywhere. Like it exists, but to understand that it's like in those supportive spaces, we're there waiting. And if you fall, like we'll be there to help pick you up. And I think that's the unique part about it, is understanding that it's like you're allowed to break in those periods. You're allowed to have a bad day, and to understand that you're in a group of people or surrounded by people that are willing to like put a hand out and lift you up. Like that to me is like such a sweet spot. And I know that's what we're creating with the Enduring Minds community. And we've seen it with all of our guests and all of our conversations that you and I have had, Ohm has had. And I just think we're just getting started, and this is going to just grow and grow. And there's going to be more people, like you said, wanting to be a part of that supportive space, that supportive community, just being there for one another.
Do you think, and I'm going to bring Jarren Duran back into this, in the supportive space and players, because every 3 to 4 days he's facing a new team. All right. Then there's a new team that they're either traveling to or they're coming to Boston to play. And do you think that there are going to be moments where it's lip service, where there's a player or players who think this guy is soft? I can't believe he did the thing that he did. Like, why would he do that? But when they see him in person, be like, hey man, I saw the episode, good job, or something to that effect. Do you think that there will still be that, or will they avoid talking to him at all?
I think there's going to be 3 camps. There's going to be the ones that are going to approach him and be, like you said, very open and be like, I am so happy you brought it up. Like, me too, man. And then there are going to be the people that try to tear him down and say that he's soft. But to me, those are the people that speak poorly about people that have come out about mental health and all those things. I believe that they haven't met something in themselves and they're afraid to do it. So they fight against it. And the way they fight against it is to tear other people down, to bring them down with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the third one is going to be the people that are so afraid of, and they may not even know it yet, that something's going on in their life, and they will just disassociate from it and not want to talk to him because they're afraid that conversation is even going to come up, because they're not ready for it. And I think those are the 3 camps that you're going to see when it comes to other players.
One of the things I saw in the episode, and you just reminded me of it, is Justin Turner tells Jarren Duran that he's left a bottle of bourbon or whiskey or something to that effect. And he says, I know you don't drink. And I didn't think about this at the time, but the way what you just said made me connect the dots. I wonder if him quitting drinking was step 1 in getting himself back to level ground, shall we say, with his mental health. They didn't really go into that in the episode. Well, what do you think?
Yeah, I think any addiction, anything that is alcohol, gambling, drugs, any of those things, those are all distraction and avoidance techniques to not deal with your problems. No different than somebody running 140K a week or cycling 400 kilometers a week. Like, those are all avoidance and distraction tactics if you're not doing the work already. to just let you forget about it. And then you don't, oh, I'm drinking, I don't have to think about it. I'll just move on to the next thing and the next thing, and keep myself so busy and keep myself sedated in a sense from the actual pain that I'm experiencing.
Yeah, I hope, my hope is that he continues to tell his story and not just baseball statistics, right? Not just how many home runs and RBIs and things like that. That he continues to share his story, ups and downs, because I think that is where the impact lies. Like we've got that first shot of adrenaline today because we watched episode 4, because we read an article. And with the way the world moves today, right, it's a 2.4-second news cycle. Like this will be gone before you know it. But if he continues to have a conversation about it, then we can continue to have conversations about it as well. What do you think about that opportunity for him to continue to have this conversation? Or is this a scenario, do you think that, hey, I'm a Major League Baseball player, I'm trying to win a World Series, I got to focus on hitting a baseball that's getting thrown at me at 98 miles an hour?
I think he has such a unique opportunity to have such a large platform that I would love to see him use that platform for good, to support other people, to show other people that it's okay, rather than just letting it go. I mean, I have a, like we talked about right from the beginning, even before we started recording, like I have a large amount of respect for somebody that is willing to come out in this large of a spotlight. Like, yes, we brought our stories forward. We don't have this big of a spotlight on us, but to share something like that in that way, that raw, that vulnerable, that takes guts. And I have so much respect for somebody that's willing to do that, because that tells me that they've also done a lot of work to get to that point. Because there's no way that he would have talked the way that he's talking during his down year in 2023, when he was talking about how bad it was. And I think that's the cool part about it, is you can see how much healing and how much growth he's had in what he's doing. Because I'm a believer that, people who are willing to come out and speak about these things, they've met that thing within themselves, and either they were not believed or questioned or any of these things. Those are the people that are going to come out and speak in a very candid way, because they don't want anybody else to experience what they went through alone. And I think that's the other big thing with our Enduring Minds community, is that I don't want anybody to feel like they're alone in this. And I can only imagine if you're sitting in a room by yourself, ready to take your own life, like that is probably the most alone anybody could ever feel at that point. And if our community can come together and have somebody not ever have to experience that for themselves, like that to me is what we're building here.
Yeah. So we have no structure for this show. So, which was something I love about this show. The one question I do have last in my mind is, during the episode, they showed the fans that were yelling at him, right? And I vividly remember a young gentleman with this just anger on his face that Jarren Duran struck out, like just anger. And then they started showing the tweets, right? This guy sucks and all of these things. I wonder what the impact on that individual and the other individuals that they showed their faces of, they see this episode and they realize what Duran was going through and continues to go through, right? And do they change their mindset? Do they say to themselves, man, what an asshole I was, and start to adjust their thinking and work on their mental health?
Yeah, there's nothing like putting a mirror up to yourself and seeing yourself for like what you are in that moment. And maybe you don't realize it because, again, unconscious programming. But I know you saw the last part of the episode where they were all booing in the stands, and his mom turned around and said, "That's my boy."
Yeah.
And they said, "Oh, okay, I guess we'll let him get a hit." And to me, like that right there is like what I would love like everybody to like. Can you imagine how amazing sports would be? And I get it, there's rivalries and there's all these things and all this stuff going on, and bench clearing brawls and all this other stuff, and that's fine. But can you imagine if just like everybody just like was in awe of these like professional athletes that are going out there day after day and doing these things? Like if everybody was just like genuinely in awe and curious and like stoked about going to a baseball game, and everybody's high-fiving. Like how many times have you been to like a home game for like a big team, and then you go to an away game and you're like, in a segregated part of the stand alone by yourself. And it's like, that's the way that I see it. Is like, why can't every game feel like a home game?
Yeah, when I was younger, a buddy of mine and I lived in New York at the time. We would go to Eagles and Giants games, one in Jersey where the Giants played and one in Philly where the Eagles played. And there was zero chance I would wear any Giants gear going into the vet at the time because I didn't want to get harassed. I didn't want to get punches thrown at me. Like I just didn't want to, I didn't want to put myself in jeopardy, basically, right? And if you think about it, right, the word fan is short for fanatic. And that's what people act like, is they're fanatical about this stuff. And I always ask myself this question, like, when you wake up the day after your team loses, what has really changed? Right? Like your bank account didn't get smaller, your bank account didn't get bigger when they won. Like literally for you personally, zero changed. So root your ass off, be happy, be sad, like go crazy, but don't be a dick. Like there's just no reason for it.
You're talking about your fantasy baseball team, and I remember them. It was a hockey, so I did NFL fantasy football for a long time, and I specifically remember players getting like horrible like death threats and DMs because they got an injury in their game and their player was out for their fantasy league. And I'm like, how like, and this comes right back around to that same thing that I said about parents living vicariously through like these like fantasy teams that you create. You're living vicariously through these players that you have on your team. You think you own them. Like these are your people, and they're like, I paid for these people. And you're like, buddy, like this is basically like sports cosplay. It is not like you are it has nothing to do with you in the end. It really doesn't. And it does
Does
come
not.
back to the endurance sports and racing as well too. At the end of a race and you finish, unless you're like, again, we're talking about the elites of the elites finishing and doing all these things, like at the end of the day, like you said, when you wake up the next morning from a race, what do you have? Well, probably swollen feet. You probably have some sore knees, some sore legs. Maybe you're hungry. Maybe you're tired still. But ultimately, like the race is done, and now it's just a memory. You don't.
Yep.
That's all it is. It's literally just a memory in your mind that you're probably going to file away. Maybe something fun happened. You might remember some piece of that day a little bit more. But that's all it is, right?
Yeah, that's it. And I hope people hear this conversation. Those are that operate in our world, in the endurance sports world, and realize, yeah, he's right. Like I raced on Saturday, on Sunday, I got up and went and got a cheeseburger. Like nothing really changed in the grand scheme of things. And I hope for some of the fans that see themselves in that video, and fans who weren't in that video but have done those things, can see for themselves, like, man, I'm taking this way too seriously. Like I should go to the baseball game, get a couple of hot dogs, some popcorn, and enjoy seeing experts in their industry, because that's what those guys are. They're experts in their industry, and it's fascinating to think about them performing at the levels that they perform at. Because even the worst guy on the team is still better than 0.1% of the planet at hitting a baseball when it's all said and done, right? It's amazing.
Yeah, I absolutely would love to see within our ultra and endurance community more people coming out to talk about it, because you and I both know that our community has inherited a lot of people who have addiction, mental health, and other situations, and they've turned to running as their form of relief, or cycling, or whatever endurance sport they choose. And I would love to have more of these conversations and stories, and some more high profile athletes willing to have the conversations like Jarren is having within Major League Baseball. And like, let's bring it to every sport. Let's have these conversations out in the open, so then everybody feels a little less alone.
100%. So I will wrap it up after I give the baton to you for your final thoughts on our first episode of the In Between, and the Clubhouse episode 4 with Jarren Duran.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I just have a lot of respect for somebody willing to put themselves into that vulnerability and into that space, and knowing that there is going to be conversations about them, and having the understanding and the tools to know that he can handle it now, whereas he may not have been able to do that before, and really using his platform for good. And I think that's the piece that I saw through everything, is using his platform for a positive. And I really hope that he continues down that path.
Yeah, agreed completely. For those of you who have made it into the 45-minute level of this conversation, thank you so much for sticking with us. This is going to be a show that we put out every couple of weeks. It's called The In Between. Evan and I will be chatting about mental health struggles and conversations surrounding mental health. In this particular instance, we talked about episode 4 of the Clubhouse featuring Jarren Duran, who discusses a suicide attempt. If you feel like you're in that same position or you know of somebody in that position, please dial 988 and get some help. You are not alone. There are people here to help you. Evan, thank you so much for joining me today. I'll see you in a couple of weeks on The In Between.
Thanks, Jason.